Welcome to Terror Tales.
Memory updated. The Whispering Walls. Terror in the Bedroom. Narrator's part only. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when the whispers began. At first, they were so faint, so easily dismissed as the wind brushing against the old wooden walls of the house. But over time, they grew more distinct, more persistent, until ignoring them became impossible. It started after I moved into this old Victorian house, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, a place that promised solitude and peace. I'd been through a lot, too much if I'm being honest. The idea of escaping to a secluded place where I could gather my thoughts and rebuild my life seemed like a perfect plan. Little did I know, the house had its own plans for me. The bedroom, a grand space with high ceilings and a large window overlooking the garden, initially felt like a sanctuary. The walls were adorned with intricate patterns, the kind you don't see in modern houses. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the designs, tracing them with my eyes until I fell asleep. But then, the whispers began. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a product of stress, of too many sleepless nights. The house was old, after all. Old houses creak. They settle. They make noises that newer homes don't. But as the nights went on, the sounds became clearer. It wasn't the creaking of wood or the settling of the foundation. It was voices. Whispering, just on the edge of perception, like a conversation happening in another room, muffled but there. I would lie awake, straining to hear, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers were low, indistinct, as if they didn't want to be understood. Sometimes I could make out a word or two, my name, perhaps, or a soft laugh, but never enough to form a complete thought. And always, they came from the walls. It wasn't long before I started to dread going to bed. I'd stay up late, reading or watching TV, trying to drown out the whispers with noise. But no matter how late I stayed up, the moment I turned off the lights and laid my head on the pillow, they would start again. Whispering, murmuring, almost as if they were waiting for me. The nights became a blur of broken sleep and growing anxiety. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, convinced that someone was in the room with me. But when I turned on the light, I was always alone. The walls, however, seemed closer somehow, like they were closing in on me, suffocating me. During the day, the house felt normal. Sunlight streamed through the windows, birds chirped outside, and the whispers were silent. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that I was simply stressed, and once I settled into my new life, everything would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew something was wrong with that bedroom. I started sleeping with the TV on, hoping that the constant noise would drown out the whispers. It helped, but only for a while. The voices grew louder, more insistent. They began to form words, phrases that sent chills down my spine. Come closer. Listen. We're waiting. The whispers were no longer confined to the walls at night. I began to hear them during the day, faintly, as I went about my routine. I'd be in the kitchen, making coffee, and I'd hear my name called from the bedroom, soft, almost sweet. But when I'd go to check, there'd be nothing, just the silence of an empty room. I stopped going into the bedroom unless I had to. I slept on the couch, in the living room, trying to avoid whatever was happening in that room. But the whispers followed me. They started invading my dreams, pulling me back to the bedroom, to the walls that seemed to pulse with life. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of the whispers still echoing in my ears. One night, I woke up to find myself standing in front of the bedroom door, my hand on the knob. I didn't remember getting up or walking over there. It was as if something had drawn me to it, compelled me to stand there. The whispers were louder than ever, and for the first time I could understand them clearly. "Open the door. Let us in." I pulled my hand back, terrified. I knew that whatever was behind that door wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it wanted me. I stumbled back to the living room, my heart pounding, and spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, trying to keep the darkness at bay. But the darkness was relentless. The next morning I noticed something strange. The walls in the bedroom looked different, almost as if they were bulging in places, like something was pressing against them from the other side. The intricate patterns I once admired now seemed distorted, twisted into grotesque shapes. It was as if the house itself was changing, reacting to the whispers that haunted it. I decided to leave. Whatever was in that house, in those walls, wasn't something I could live with. But as I packed my bags, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. They pleaded with me, begged me to stay, to listen. "Don't go. We need you." I ignored them. I couldn't stay, not after everything that had happened. But as I reached the front door, ready to leave for good, the whispers turned into screams. Loud, agonized screams that echoed through the entire house. I froze, my hand on the doorknob, paralyzed by the sheer intensity of the sound. Then, silence. A deafening, oppressive silence that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I turned around, slowly, and saw that the walls of the house were no longer just walls. They were moving, shifting, like they were alive. And from within them, something was emerging. Something dark and twisted and full of malice. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. The house loomed behind me, its once welcoming facade now a twisted mockery of what it had been. I could still hear the whispers, faint but there, calling to me, beckoning me to return. I never went back. I couldn't. The house still stands, silent and empty, a shell of its former self. But I know that the whispers are still there, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to answer their call. And sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet and still, I can still hear them, whispering. It all began the day I bought the bed. A grand, antique four-poster with intricately carved wood and an aura of timeless elegance. It was exactly what I'd been searching for, a piece that would transform my bedroom into a sanctuary of luxury and comfort. But I didn't know then that the bed came with more than just an aesthetic appeal. It came with something darker, something that had been lying dormant for who knows how long. The bed arrived on a crisp autumn morning. I remember the chill in the air, the smell of fallen leaves mingling with the scent of aged wood, as the delivery men struggled to maneuver the massive frame up the narrow staircase. They left it disassembled in the bedroom, and I spent the better part of the day putting it together. Every twist of the screw, every tap of the mallet, filled me with a strange sense of satisfaction. I stood back, admiring my handiwork, unaware that I had just sealed my fate. That first night, I slept like a baby. The mattress was new, firm yet soft, and the bed itself felt solid, like it had been built to withstand the ages. But the peaceful sleep didn't last. By the third night, the dreams began. At first, they were just unsettling. I'd find myself in unfamiliar places, dark, narrow corridors, empty rooms with no windows, abandoned buildings that seemed to go on forever. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. But I always managed to shake it off. Everyone has bad dreams, I told myself. It's just stress. But the dreams grew worse, more vivid, more real. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, convinced that I was still trapped in whatever nightmare had just consumed me. I started dreading going to bed, afraid of what my mind might conjure up next. I tried staying up late, watching mindless TV shows, reading until my eyes burned, anything to avoid sleep. But eventually, exhaustion would take over, and I'd drift off, only to be plunged back into the nightmare chamber that my bed had become. The dreams weren't just dreams anymore. They were something else, something more sinister. I began to see shadows moving in the corners of my room, even when I was wide awake. I'd hear soft whispers in the dead of night, voices that I couldn't quite make out, but knew were speaking directly to me. I'd feel a presence in the room, watching me, waiting. One night, I woke up to find myself standing at the foot of the bed, staring down at it. My hands were trembling, and I had no idea how I'd gotten there. The sheets were twisted around my legs, the pillows scattered across the floor, as if I'd been thrashing around in my sleep. But the worst part was the feeling that something had been in the bed with me. The mattress was indented, as if someone or something had lain beside me. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, or maybe I'd rolled over in my sleep. But deep down, I knew the truth. The bed wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was something else, something that had been waiting for me. As the days passed, the presence grew stronger. It started to invade my waking life. I'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find nothing there. I'd hear footsteps in the hallway, even though I lived alone. And the whispers, those damn whispers, became more insistent. They started calling my name, urging me to lie down, to rest, to let go. I knew I had to get rid of the bed. It was the only solution. But every time I tried, something would stop me. The delivery company wouldn't take it back. The local charity refused to pick it up, saying they were full. Even the junkyard wouldn't touch it. It was as if the bed had anchored itself to me, refusing to let go. I started sleeping on the couch, avoiding the bedroom altogether. But it didn't help. The presence followed me. No matter where I slept, the nightmares found me. The bed became a malevolent force in my life, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. I could feel it pulling at me, drawing me back to it, like a dark magnet. One night I woke up to find myself lying in the bed, even though I was certain I had fallen asleep on the couch. The sheets were wrapped around me tightly, like a cocoon, and I couldn't move. The room was filled with shadows, thick and oppressive, and the whispers were louder than ever. They weren't just calling my name anymore. They were telling me things. Dark, horrible things that made my skin crawl. I struggled to free myself, to break free from the bed's hold, but it was like fighting against an invisible force. The air grew thick, suffocating, and the shadows pressed in on me. And then, for the first time, I saw it. A figure, dark and indistinct, standing at the foot of the bed, watching me with eyes that gleamed in the darkness. I don't know how long I lay there, paralyzed by fear, unable to move or scream. The figure didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, watching, and then as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The room was empty again, but the feeling of dread lingered, thick and suffocating. I knew then that I couldn't stay in the house any longer. The bed had to go, even if it meant burning it to the ground. I packed my bags, not caring what I left behind, and fled. I didn't look back as I drove away, leaving the nightmare chamber behind me. But even now, miles away, I can still feel its presence. The bed, the whispers, the figure in the shadows, they haunt my dreams, creeping into my mind when I'm at my most vulnerable. I can't escape it. It's a part of me now, a curse that I can never outrun. And I know, deep down, that one day I'll find myself back in that bed, back in that nightmare chamber. Because no matter how far I run, the curse will find me. The bed will call me back, and next time, I might not be able to escape. It wasn't supposed to be like this. When I first moved into the apartment, I thought I had found the perfect place. It was small, but cozy, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood where the loudest sounds were the birds chirping outside in the morning. The bedroom was my favorite part, a serene space with pale blue walls and a large window that let in the soft glow of the moon at night. I couldn't wait to turn it into my sanctuary, my place of peace. But peace is the last thing I found. The first night in the apartment, I slept like a rock. The exhaustion of moving had knocked me out cold, and I didn't stir until the morning light filtered through the window. But on the second night, I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't know what had roused me. I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, listening to the silence. And then I heard it. A soft, barely audible sound, like someone breathing in the room. I sat up in bed, straining to hear, but the sound was gone. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Just the building settling, or maybe the wind outside. I tried to shake it off, but something about that sound unnerved me. I had felt completely alone in the apartment until that moment. But now I wasn't so sure. The next few nights were quiet. I went about my routine, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, trying to make the place feel like home. But every time I went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I would lie there in the dark, listening to the silence, waiting for that soft breathing sound to return. It didn't, but the unease lingered. Then, on the fifth night, I woke up again. This time I knew exactly what had woken me, the feeling of someone watching me. My eyes snapped open, and for a moment I was certain that I saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, just a shadow in the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone. I sat up, heart racing, staring into the dark corner where the figure had been. There was nothing there, just the pale light from the window casting long shadows across the room. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light. But from that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the room. The shadows seemed to grow darker, thicker, as if they were more than just the absence of light. And every night, I would wake up at exactly the same time, 3:15 a.m., with the overwhelming sense that something was in the room with me. It wasn't long before the dreams began, vivid, terrifying dreams that left me gasping for air when I woke up. I dreamed of dark figures, faceless and silent, standing at the foot of my bed, watching me with unseen eyes. I dreamed of cold hands brushing against my skin, of whispers just on the edge of hearing, telling me things I couldn't understand. And every time I woke up, I would see those same shadows in the room, darker and more oppressive than before. I tried everything to get rid of the feeling. I slept with the lights on, played soft music to drown out the silence, even rearranged the furniture in the bedroom, hoping it would change the energy of the space. But nothing worked. The shadows remained, and the presence in the room grew stronger. One night, I woke up to find that I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed, trapped in that terrifying state between sleep and wakefulness, known as sleep paralysis. I could see everything, the room, the shadows, the pale light filtering through the window, but I couldn't move a muscle. And then I saw it. A figure, darker than the shadows, slowly creeping toward the bed. It was tall and thin, with long arms that seemed to stretch impossibly far. Its face was hidden in darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching me, studying me. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything to break free from the paralysis, but my body refused to obey. The figure loomed over me, its presence suffocating, and for a moment I thought it was going to reach out and touch me. But just as its hand was about to brush against my skin, I snapped out of the paralysis, jerking upright in bed with a gasp. The figure was gone. The room was empty, but the feeling of dread lingered, heavy and oppressive. I knew then that whatever was in the room with me wasn't just a figment of my imagination. It was real, and it was getting closer. The nights after that were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I started staying up as late as I could, drinking coffee, watching mindless TV, anything to avoid falling asleep. But no matter how hard I tried, sleep always claimed me, eventually. And every time I closed my eyes, the nightmares returned, darker and more terrifying than before. It was supposed to be just a quick business trip. 3 nights in a small town, a couple of meetings, and then back home. When I checked into the hotel, I had no idea that room 13 would be my undoing. The hotel itself was nothing special, just a modest, aging building on the outskirts of town. But the room was something else entirely. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt it, a heavy, oppressive atmosphere that seemed to press down on me, making it hard to breathe. The air was thick with a musty odor, and the walls were stained with age. The bed, an old wooden frame with a faded quilt, sat in the center of the room like a monument to forgotten nightmares. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should ask for a different room, but I shook it off. It was just a room, after all. How bad could it be? The first night passed without incident. I was tired from the long drive, and I fell asleep almost immediately. But I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of soft whispers. At first, I thought it was coming from the hallway outside my door, but as I lay there, listening, I realized that the whispers were coming from inside the room. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The whispers were faint, barely audible, like voices carried on the wind. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they filled me with an inexplicable sense of dread. I glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, but there was nothing. Just the dim light from the street lamp outside, casting eerie shapes on the walls. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired and hearing things. But as I lay back down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the room. The whispers continued, soft and insistent, until I finally drifted off into a restless sleep. The next morning, I tried to put the experience out of my mind. I had work to do, meetings to attend, and I couldn't afford to be distracted by strange noises in the night. But as the day wore on, I found myself thinking more and more about the whispers. Had I really heard them, or had it just been a dream? I wasn't sure, but the unease lingered. That night, I hesitated before going to bed. The room felt different now, more sinister, as if it were watching me, waiting for me to fall asleep. I double-checked the locks on the door and windows, turned on every light in the room, and finally crawled into bed, my nerves on edge. It didn't take long for the whispers to return. This time they were louder, more distinct. I could hear multiple voices, all speaking at once, their words overlapping in a chaotic jumble. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakable. Angry, desperate, pleading. I threw off the covers and turned on the bedside lamp, my heart racing. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving the room in an eerie silence. I sat there, clutching the lamp, my eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. But the room was empty, just as it had been the night before. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the rest of the night sitting up in bed, listening for the whispers, but they didn't return. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I breathed a sigh of relief. The night was over, and the whispers were gone, but I knew they would be back. By the third night, I was on edge. The unease had grown into full-blown dread, and I found myself dreading the moment I would have to go back to room 13. I considered asking the hotel manager for a different room, but something held me back. It was as if the room had a hold on me, drawing me back despite my fear. That night, the whispers started as soon as I turned off the lights. They were louder than ever, more insistent, as if the voices were trying to tell me something important. I lay there in the dark, frozen with fear, listening to the cacophony of voices swirling around me. And then for the first time, I understood a single word: leave. The word was clear, unmistakable, and it sent a chill down my spine. The voices were warning me, telling me to get out while I still could. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, trapped in the bed as the whispers grew louder, more frantic. And then, the temperature in the room dropped. It was as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the air, leaving behind a bone-chilling cold. I could see my breath in the dim light, and I pulled the covers tighter around me, trying to ward off the icy grip of fear. That's when I saw it, a shadow, darker than the rest, moving in the corner of the room. It was tall, humanoid, but its features were indistinct, like a smudge on the fabric of reality. It moved slowly, deliberately, gliding toward the bed with an unnatural grace. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything to get away from that thing. But my body refused to obey. I was trapped, a silent sleeper in a bedroom of dread as the shadow loomed over me. And then it spoke. Stay. The word was a command, a demand that echoed in my mind long after the shadow had faded back into the darkness. The room fell silent again, but the damage was done. The bed that had once been my refuge had become a prison, and I knew that the shadow would return. The next morning, I packed my bags. I didn't care about the meetings or the work anymore. All I wanted was to get out of that hotel, to escape the clutches of room 13. As I reached for the doorknob, I hesitated. The shadow's command still echoed in my mind, a dark whisper that held me in place. I turned back to look at the bed one last time. It was just a bed, just a room, but it held a power over me that I couldn't explain. I knew that if I left, I would never be free of it. The shadow would follow me, haunt me, until I returned to room 13. And so, with a heavy heart, I set my bags down and closed the door. The room was silent again, but I could feel the presence lurking in the shadows, waiting for the night to fall. I had made my choice, and now I would have to live with the consequences. As I lay down in the bed that night, I braced myself for the whispers, for the cold, for the shadow that would soon come to claim me. I knew that I had become a part of room 13, just as it had become a part of me, and there was no escape. The last thing I remember before sleep took me was the sound of the whispers, louder and more insistent than ever before. They were no longer telling me to leave. They were welcoming me home. And then the darkness swallowed me whole.